The alarms howled through the corridors of the Iron Requiem, their sharp wails blending with the frantic voices of officers struggling to keep order. The warship shook as another explosion ripped through Outpost Vega's outer defense grid. Captain Darius Vex gripped the armrests of his command chair, his eyes fixed on the holoscreen displaying the battlefield beyond. A swarm of derelict ships, once proud carriers and battleships of the Galactic Vanguard, now drifted toward Vega like a spectral armada. They had no life signs. No crew. But the infected that lurked within them were something far worse. The Graveborn. Status. Vex barked. Lieutenant Adrian Rook wiped the sweat from her brow as she scanned the console. Sir, the defense grid is failing. We've lost power to the outer planetary shield, and the eastern hangars are overrun. The infected have breached Dock 12. Vex's jaw tightened. They had known the risk. Vega had stood as humanity's last bastion in this sector, but the Graveborn were relentless. It wasn't just a zombie plague, it was an intelligent force, spreading from ship to ship, world to world, until nothing remained but hollow husks and a hunger for destruction. Divert all firepower to the main fleet. Vex commanded. If we let them land, we're finished. Aye, sir. The warship's rail cannons roared, launching tungsten slugs into the abyss. The first wave of derelicts shattered under the assault, their decomposing hulls breaking apart like brittle bones. But for every ship destroyed, 3 more took its place. A deep, guttural transmission crackled through the bridge speakers. It wasn't language. It was something else, something that made Vex's blood run cold. "They're in our systems," whispered Lieutenant Karn, his face pale. "They're learning from us." Vex gritted his teeth. The Graveborn weren't just using abandoned ships, they were hijacking operational vessels, overriding defenses, cutting through firewalls as if they were alive. A shuddering impact sent Rook tumbling from her seat. "Captain. We've been boarded." Vex sprang to his feet. "Seal all bulkheads. Deploy countermeasures." The lights flickered. For a brief moment, the bridge was bathed in a ghostly blue glow as the emergency backups kicked in. Then the screaming started. It came from the lower decks. The kind of screams that echoed through metal corridors, distorted by the comm channels, turning into something inhuman. A distorted voice broke through the ship's intercom. It was grainy, mechanical, yet undeniably sentient. "Join us." Vex's heart pounded. "Override that transmission." "No use, sir," Rook stammered. "They're inside the network. They're talking to us. Then we talk back." Vex slammed a button on his console, opening a direct frequency. "I don't know what you are, but I sure as hell know what you're not. You may have our ships, but you don't have us." Silence. Then came a sound, a wet, slithering hiss, like flesh scraping against steel. "You will." Vex turned sharply. "We're pulling back. Get the fleet out of here, now." "But sir," Rook protested. "If we retreat, Vega falls." Vex clenched his fists. Vega was already lost. The moment they had let the Graveborn reach the station, the battle had turned. He had fought in dozens of wars, but this one was different. This wasn't just an invasion. It was a consumption. "Prepare for emergency jump," he ordered. "We regroup at Bastion Prime. We fight another day." The ship trembled again as the last planetary defenses crumbled. Through the viewport, Vex saw the station begin to break apart, its once proud towers now infested with moving horrors that should have never existed. A desperate voice crackled through the comms. "This is Lieutenant Garin. They're inside my mind." The transmission cut to static. Vex set his jaw. Not today. The Iron Requiem turned away from Vega, its thrusters igniting as the fleet followed suit. They left behind a burning station, a fallen colony, and the horrifying realization that the Graveborn were not done. They were only beginning. The Iron Requiem tore through the void, its hull rattling as it emerged from the emergency jump. The stars around it were unfamiliar, distant, but at least they were far from the Graveborn. Captain Darius Vex gripped the edges of his command console, his mind still processing what had just happened. Outpost Vega was gone. "Status report," Vex ordered, his voice like steel. Lieutenant Adrian Rook exhaled sharply, her fingers flying over the console. "We're intact, but barely. Our FTL drive is strained, won't be able to make another emergency jump for at least 3 hours. The fleet took heavy losses. We lost the Hammerfall and Solstice Dawn mid-jump. They didn't make it out." Vex's expression darkened. 2 ships. Thousands of lives. And those were just the ones he knew about. Survivors? Karn, the ship's comms officer, hesitated before responding. "We've got distress signals from Enduring Valor and Draken's Wrath. They suffered severe boarding actions during the retreat. Their captains report that not all who boarded were still human by the time we jumped." Silence fell over the bridge. Vex didn't need the details. He knew what that meant. The infected had made it onto the ships before they jumped, possibly even onto his vessel. Rook's console flickered. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Enduring Valor. Patch them through." The view screen buzzed, revealing a chaotic scene. Captain Thren of the Enduring Valor appeared, his uniform torn, his face drenched in sweat. Sparks rained down behind him as warning sirens blared. "Vex." Thren's voice was frantic. "We've been compromised. The Graveborn, they're inside. They're thinking, Vex. They're sabotaging systems, overriding firewalls. We can't purge them fast enough." Vex's stomach clenched. "Evacuate who you can. Get your people to the lifeboats." Thren's face twisted. "It's too late. They've already locked us out of the controls. They." The screen distorted, a wet, unnatural sound slithering through the transmission. Then, in a chillingly smooth voice, something else spoke. "Run, little captain. Run while you can." Then the transmission cut. Vex stood frozen for a heartbeat. The bridge crew was silent, their faces pale. Then Rook gasped. "Sir, the Enduring Valor, it's accelerating. It's headed straight for us." Vex's eyes snapped to the tactical display. The Enduring Valor, a war-class battleship, was charging toward them at full burn. But there was no distress, no attempts to course-correct. The ship was no longer in human hands. "Brace for impact." The fleet scrambled. The Iron Requiem and its remaining warships veered, thrusters blazing as the massive, infected ship barreled toward them. "They're trying to ram us," Karn shouted. Vex's mind raced. He had fought enemy fleets, outmaneuvered armadas, but this? This was different. The Graveborn didn't care about survival. They only cared about spreading. "Fire all forward batteries," Vex commanded. Rail cannons lit up the void, unleashing a storm of firepower at the incoming warship. Explosions tore through the Enduring Valor's hull, breaking it apart, but it kept coming. The comms flared again, another transmission from the Draken's Wrath. "Captain Vex." It was Commander Lorne. His voice was strained, barely audible over the screaming in the background. "They've taken the reactor. We're..." The transmission cut off. Then, the Draken's Wrath exploded. The shockwave slammed into the Iron Requiem, sending Vex and his crew sprawling as fire and debris filled the void. The Enduring Valor, now engulfed in flames, spun wildly before colliding with the wreckage of the destroyed battleship, shattering into a massive fireball. The bridge flickered with red emergency lights. Damage report. Vex barked, shaking off the impact. Rook groaned as she pulled herself back to her console. Shields at 12%. Hull integrity, holding, barely. Sir, we can't keep taking hits like this. Vex exhaled, steadying himself. The Graveborn were forcing them into a war unlike any other. They didn't fight for victory. They fought for infestation. Get me all fleet captains on secure comms, Vex ordered. This war isn't about territory anymore. It's about survival. Karn hesitated. Sir, that's the problem. We started with 12 ships. Now we're down to 6. 6. That was all that remained of humanity's last fleet. Vex clenched his jaw. The Graveborn had evolved. They were in the systems, in the ships. If they were going to fight back, they needed to do the one thing the infected wouldn't expect. Something drastic. He took a deep breath. Prepare for silent running. No transmissions. No signals. We vanish into the void until we figure out how to kill them for good. Rook looked at him, stunned. Sir, that means we'll be alone. No reinforcements. No help. Vex's eyes burned with fury. Then we make sure we're the ones left standing. The Iron Requiem drifted through the void, its engines cold, its systems running at minimum power. Around it, the surviving warships, just 6 out of the original 12, did the same, vanishing into the endless black. No transmissions. No lights. Just the silence of deep space. Captain Darius Vex sat motionless in his command chair, his fingers curled into fists. Every instinct screamed at him to fight, to strike back at the Graveborn before they could claim more ships, more lives. But this wasn't a war of brute force. The infected weren't mindless. They were learning. And that meant one thing: survival required patience. Status? Vex murmured. Lieutenant Adrian Rook barely turned her head. Even their voices had been kept low, as if the Graveborn could hear them through the silence of the void. Fleet is holding position. Systems at minimal output, heat dissipation stable. No signs of pursuit. Vex exhaled. They'd executed the silent running maneuver perfectly, leaving no traceable energy signatures. If the Graveborn were looking for them, they'd be searching through a needle in an endless cosmic haystack. But something still gnawed at him. Any movement in the sector? Karn, his comms officer, hesitated. No active transmissions, sir. But... His voice trailed off. Vex turned. Speak. Karn's fingers hovered over his console. I'm picking up something. Not a signal, but a pattern. Small energy fluctuations, barely detectable. It's almost like... A new sound crackled through the bridge's speakers. A whisper. Faint. Like a voice carried on solar winds, slipping through the hull of the ship. Vex felt the air turn electric. Where is that coming from? Karn's face paled. I don't know, sir. It's not on any comm channel. It's inside the ship. A cold weight settled in Vex's chest. Sound the alarms. Now. Rook's hands flew over the console, but the moment she hit the command, the ship's systems flickered, then went dead silent. The warning sirens failed. The lights dimmed even further. Then the whispering grew louder. Vex stood, reaching for the sidearm holstered at his hip. He knew that sound. It wasn't static. It wasn't interference. It was the Graveborn. They're here. A scream erupted from the lower decks. The bridge crew jumped as the internal comms flared to life. Containment breach in section C-12. Oh God, they came through the walls. The voice was panicked, broken by static. Then a horrible wet gurgle, like flesh twisting into something it wasn't meant to be. Then silence. Vex's mind raced. They'd gone to silent running, no signals, no heat trails. How had the infected found them? Then the answer hit him like a rail slug. We took them with us. The Graveborn didn't need to track signals. They were already inside. Somewhere, somehow, when the enduring valor and Draken's wrath had been compromised, something must have slipped through to one of the surviving ships. Or worse, onto his. Vex turned sharply. We need to purge the infected. Now. Lock down all non-essential corridors. Deploy fire teams to sweep every deck. If something moves, we burn it. Sir. Karn's voice cracked. I think I figured it out. Vex turned. Karn was staring at his console, his hands shaking. The whispering. It's not random. It's a frequency. They're communicating. He swallowed hard. They're coordinating between ships without transmitting. Vex clenched his jaw. The Graveborn were using the very ships they infected as network relays. They didn't need signals. They were the signals. A new voice burst through the comms, this time from the Black Revenant, one of the last remaining warships. Captain Vex. We've got movement, Deck 5 is compromised. We didn't even see them coming. A chorus of gunfire echoed through the channel. Then another scream. Then another. Vex's grip tightened on his sidearm. We're done hiding. Patch me through to the fleet. Rook hesitated. Sir, if we transmit. They already know where we are. She nodded grimly and engaged the fleet-wide comms. Vex took a breath, his voice turning to cold steel. This is Captain Darius Vex. We are no longer running. We are no longer waiting. We burn these bastards out, ship by ship, deck by deck. I want every infected purged, every breach sealed. No more losses. No more hesitation. He took a step forward, gripping the console like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to reality. This war just changed. We're not survivors anymore. We're exterminators. For a moment, silence. Then one voice. Understood, sir. Then another. Aye, Captain. Then the sound of weapons being armed, of battle protocols being engaged. The last human fleet had been hunted long enough. Now, they were the hunters. The warships of humanity's last fleet burned through the void, breaking away from silent running and igniting their engines in full. Captain Darius Vex had given the order, no more hiding. No more running. The Graveborn had turned their ships into hunting grounds, spreading like a disease through the very vessels meant to protect humanity. But now? Now, they fought back. Inside the Iron Requiem, Vex moved with his fire team, a plasma rifle clutched in his hands. His boots thudded against the metal floors as they advanced through the lower decks. The emergency lights flickered, casting jagged shadows along the corridor. They had already lost communication with Deck 12. And Deck 9. He would not lose another. Movement ahead, Rook whispered. Her rifle was raised, her breathing steady despite the tension thick in the air. Vex signaled for the team to halt. The corridor before them was lined with ruptured walls, black veins of Graveborn infection pulsating against the cold metal. The infection was evolving, spreading not just through bodies, but into the ship itself. A faint sound slithered through the hallway. A wet, unnatural scraping. Then a whisper. Not words, not a voice, but something deeper, a presence crawling at the edge of the mind. Vex motioned forward. They moved with lethal precision, stepping over the corpses of fallen crew members. Some were still in uniform, but their faces were no longer human, twisted, elongated, with black veins spiraling through their skin like circuitry. Their bodies had fused with the ship's walls, tendrils of organic metal stretching from their torsos into the very bulkheads of the Iron Requiem. "They're integrating," Karn muttered. His voice was tight, filled with barely concealed horror. "They're becoming part of the ship." A low growl echoed from the corridor ahead. Then the darkness moved. The first creature lunged out of the shadows, once a man, now a nightmare. Its body jerked unnaturally, as if its limbs were controlled by invisible strings. Its eyes glowed a sickly blue. Vex fired first. His plasma bolt tore through its chest, but it didn't drop. It twitched, as if rebooting, before charging again. "Open fire!" Vex roared. The corridor exploded in light as the fire team unloaded their weapons. The air filled with the sickening stench of burning flesh and ozone. The Graveborn fell in droves, but more emerged, too many. "They're adapting," Rook shouted as another one absorbed a direct plasma shot, only for its wounds to knit back together. Vex cursed. "Fall back to engineering. We need to cut them off." They moved fast, covering each other as they backpedaled down the corridor. The creatures pursued, relentless, their voices merging into a single, ghastly chorus of whispers. Then, from his comm, a frantic voice broke through. "Captain. This is Lieutenant Baylor on the Black Revenant. We've made it to an abandoned colony on the edge of the system." "Survivors confirmed." "But sir, the Graveborn are here too." Vex's blood ran cold. "Hold your position. We're coming." He switched channels. "All ships, break formation. Set course for the colony. We end this here." The fire team reached engineering. Rook slammed the door controls, sealing the bulkhead just as the Graveborn slammed into it from the other side. "We won't hold this sector for long," Karn warned. Vex turned to the ship's AI terminal, fingers flying over the controls. "We don't have to." He input the command override. "Captain," Rook started, "what are you?" The ship's internal defenses activated. From the walls, automated turrets emerged with a whir, scanning for movement. The bulkhead sensor recognized the creatures outside. And then the corridor lit up with gunfire. Screeches filled the air as the Graveborn were torn apart in a hailstorm of tungsten rounds and plasma bolts. Vex exhaled. "That'll buy us time. Let's move." As the Iron Requiem turned toward the abandoned colony, Vex knew this battle was far from over. They were walking straight into the heart of the storm. But that was fine. Because now, they were ready for war. The Iron Requiem dropped out of FTL with a shudder, its battle-scarred hull reflecting the eerie glow of the planet below. The rest of the fleet emerged moments later, their warships limping but operational. Vex stood on the bridge, eyes locked on the world spinning beneath them. The abandoned colony. The place where humanity's last hope, and the Graveborn's next evolution, awaited. Rook adjusted the scanners. "Confirmed life signs, sir. The colony is still intact. Approximately 100 human survivors, but they're not alone." Vex clenched his jaw. "How bad?" Karn grimaced. "There's something big down there. Multiple heat signatures, larger than anything we've seen before. The Graveborn, they've changed." Vex exhaled slowly. He'd expected this. The infection wasn't just mindless. It was intelligent. It learned, it adapted, and now, it was growing. The comms crackled. Black Revenant to Iron Requiem, we're taking heavy fire from orbital defenses. The colony's automated turrets are still active. Vex turned sharply. "What? Why the hell would the survivors leave the defenses on?" Rook's console flared with new data. "Sir. I don't think the survivors did this. The turret's control network, it's infected." Vex swore. The Graveborn had done more than just take bodies. They were taking over systems. If they could manipulate the colony's defenses, then the fleet was flying straight into a death trap. Evasive maneuvers. Vex barked. All ships, break formation. Rook, find me a way through those defenses, now. Below them, the colony's guns roared to life. A descent into chaos. The sky above the colony ignited with fire as the human fleet dodged and weaved through the onslaught. Railgun slugs and missile trails filled the void, forcing the warships into a frantic dance of survival. The Black Revenant took a direct hit to its starboard side, sending a shockwave through the fleet. They won't last much longer. Karn warned. Vex's mind raced. There had to be a way in. Some way to get boots on the ground, shut down the defenses, and secure the survivors before the Graveborn overran them. Then it hit him. Launch the Helljumpers. Rook's head snapped toward him. Sir, a drop pod insertion under these conditions. It's the only way, Vex said firmly. If we wait, the fleet gets torn apart. We go now. Rook didn't argue. She relayed the order. Within moments, the Iron Requiem's lower decks rumbled as the drop pods launched, streaking toward the colony's surface like meteorites. Vex was inside one of them. As the G-forces pressed against his body, he gritted his teeth. The battlefield wasn't in the void anymore. It was down there, in the ruins. And that's where he needed to be. Into the storm. The drop pod smashed into the colony with bone-rattling force. The hatch blasted open, and Vex emerged, rifle raised. The colony was a graveyard. Towering buildings loomed in the mist, their walls scarred by past battles. The air reeked of decay. And in the distance, he heard them. The Graveborn. Rook's voice crackled in his earpiece. Captain, you've got movement inbound. Multiple contacts. Vex signaled his team forward. We push for the control tower. If we take it, we shut down the guns. They advanced through the ruined streets, their boots crunching on shattered glass. Then, from the fog, they came. The Graveborn were different now. Bigger. Stronger. Their bodies fused with metal, their limbs elongated into deadly, bladed weapons. Some had armor plating, pieces of old war machines melded into their flesh. They were becoming something else entirely. Open fire. The streets erupted in plasma and gunfire. The Graveborn charged like an unstoppable wave, but the Helljumpers fought with brutal efficiency. Vex moved through the chaos, gunning down creatures left and right, but for every one that fell, 3 more took its place. Then, the ground trembled. A deep, guttural roar echoed through the colony. And something massive stepped into view. A Graveborn Titan. It had once been a dropship, a human dropship, but the infection had twisted it into a nightmarish monstrosity. Its metal frame groaned under the weight of fused flesh and bone, and its arms were now massive siege cannons. It turned toward them, its glowing eyes locking onto Vex. Then it fired. The street exploded. Vex was thrown backward, his vision spinning as debris rained down around him. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard Rook shouting over the comms. Captain, that thing, it's the control tower. Vex pushed himself to his feet, coughing. The Graveborn had merged with the very core of the colony's systems. The only way to shut down the defenses was to kill the Titan. He clenched his fists. Then we bring the bastard down. The Graveborn Titan loomed over the ruins like a nightmare-given form, an unholy fusion of metal and flesh, pulsing with eerie blue veins of corrupted energy. It had once been a human dropship, but the infection had twisted it beyond recognition, embedding itself deep into the colony's control systems. And now it was hunting them. Vex rolled behind the wreckage of a collapsed transport as another cannon blast ripped through the streets, turning stone and steel into molten slag. His visor display flickered with warnings, shock waves, debris patterns, imminent death probabilities. "Anyone still alive out there?" he barked into his comm. Rook's voice came through, breathless but focused. "Still kicking, sir. But we lost 3 helljumpers in that last blast. We need a plan, now." Vex wiped the blood from his forehead, forcing his mind to work through the chaos. They couldn't kill this thing like the others. Its sheer size meant standard weapons wouldn't do much, and its armor, fused from the hulls of warships and infected plating, was near impenetrable. But then Rook's words echoed in his mind. "It's the control tower." That meant one thing. "Karn," Vex said. "Can you still link into the colony's network?" A pause, then Karn's static-filled reply. "Barely. The Graveborn have taken over most of the systems, but I can get fragments of data." "Why?" "Because that thing is the system," Vex growled. "It's the command hub for the colony's defenses. If we bring it down, we shut down the turrets and clear the way for the fleet." Rook cursed. "Easier said than done. That thing is walking artillery, and we're running out of places to hide." Vex peeked out from cover. The Titan's glowing blue eyes swept across the battlefield, scanning for movement. If they rushed it blindly, it would annihilate them. But if they baited it... "All right, listen up," Vex said. "We lure it toward the fusion plant." Karn hesitated. Captain, that plant's still got an active core. If it goes critical..." "That's the point," Vex interrupted. "We don't fight the Titan. We trap it." Silence. Then Rook chuckled darkly. "Well, that's insane." Vex smirked. "That's why it'll work. Now move." Hunting the hunter. Vex sprinted out of cover, firing his plasma rifle at the Titan's exposed joints. The shots barely scratched its armor, but they got its attention. The Titan let out a guttural, metallic roar, then fired. Vex dove into a roll as the ground behind him ceased to exist. The shockwave sent him tumbling forward, but he forced himself to his feet, adrenaline burning through his veins. "Rook, Karn, get into position," he barked. The helljumpers scattered, breaking into teams. Some fired at the Titan from elevated rooftops, drawing its fire, while others moved through the ruins toward the fusion plant. The Titan, enraged, began its pursuit. It stomped through the colony, its massive limbs crushing vehicles and tearing through buildings like paper. Each step sent tremors through the ground, but Vex kept running, leading it deeper into the industrial sector. Then, finally... "There. Fusion plant ahead." Rook called. The facility was still intact, its reactor humming with latent energy. Its thick containment walls were designed to withstand orbital bombardment, but not from the inside. Vex turned, heart pounding. "All right, let's bring it home. The trap is set." The Titan lumbered forward, its cannons charging for another devastating blast. Karn's voice crackled through the comms. "Almost there, almost there." The Titan raised its weaponized arm. "Now!" Vex roared. The fusion plant's automated doors slammed shut just as the Titan crossed the threshold. Karn had overridden the emergency systems, trapping the behemoth inside. The creature let out a metallic howl, its claws raking against the reinforced walls. It turned, realizing too late that it had walked into a cage. Vex didn't hesitate. "Karn, override the safety protocols." Full meltdown. Karn took a sharp breath, then nodded. "Doing it now, sir." Inside the plant, warning lights flared as the reactor core destabilized. The temperature spiked. Energy surged. The Titan screeched, turning its cannons toward the core. It was afraid. Too late. The reactor detonated. A blinding flash consumed the facility, followed by a shockwave that turned the night into day. The explosion tore through the colony, sending fire and debris into the sky. The Titan's roar was swallowed by the inferno, its towering form disintegrating in the white-hot blast. The aftermath. The dust settled. Fires smoldered. And then, silence. Vex coughed, pushing himself up from where he had been thrown by the blast. His visor flickered with damage alerts, but one notification stood out. Colony defenses, offline. Rook's voice crackled in his ear. Holy hell, we actually did it. Vex gave a tired grin. Damn right we did. Above them, the fleet moved in, now unopposed. Dropships descended toward the colony, carrying reinforcements and medics. But as Vex stood, something gnawed at him. This wasn't a victory. The Graveborn had been changing. Evolving. They had turned a warship into a Titan. What if this wasn't their final form? What if this was only the beginning? As he looked out at the burning ruins, a single, chilling thought took root in his mind. What if we haven't seen the worst of them yet? The fires still burned in the colony ruins, casting long shadows against the shattered buildings. The Graveborn Titan was gone, its monstrous frame vaporized in the fusion plant's explosion, but Vex felt no relief. Because the war wasn't over. It was changing. Rook and Karn stood beside him, staring at the devastation. Around them, the surviving Helljumpers regrouped, securing the area while dropships from the fleet landed with reinforcements. Medics moved between the wounded, dragging survivors from the rubble. All ships report the colony defenses are completely offline, Karn said. We control the planet now. Vex barely heard him. His eyes were locked on the distant horizon, where the explosion's aftermath still crackled with energy. The Graveborn had fused with their technology. Their ships. Their weapons. Their minds. And something deep inside him screamed that it wasn't over. Not even close. A sharp beep on his comm pulled him from his thoughts. Sir, this is Black Revenant, Lieutenant Baylor's voice crackled through. We found something. In the depths of the colony. Vex frowned. Found what? Baylor hesitated. You need to see it yourself. Beneath the surface. Vex, Rook, and Karn boarded a transport and flew toward the Black Revenant's landing site. The dropship descended into the deep sector of the colony, a place untouched by battle, hidden beneath the surface. What they found was wrong. Massive, biomechanical structures stretched through the cavernous depths, Graveborn growths fused with the colony's underground infrastructure. It looked like the remains of a hive, but one that had been left behind. The hell is this? Rook muttered, stepping cautiously over a blackened, vein-covered floor. Karn scanned the area. I'm detecting low-level energy pulses. Whatever this was, it's recent. They built this while they were spreading through the colony. Baylor approached, his face pale. That's not all, sir. He pointed toward the center of the chamber. Vex followed his gaze, and felt his stomach twist. Suspended in the air by writhing tendrils was a human. Or what was left of one. The man's body had been hollowed out, veins of glowing blue energy coursing through his limbs. His eyes, black as deep space, were open, staring at nothing. A Graveborn conduit. Karn shivered. It's still alive. Vex felt ice settle in his veins. The Graveborn weren't just mutating bodies and machines. They were using minds. We need to pull whatever data we can, Vex said, stepping forward. Karn, can you extract anything? Karn hesitated. Then he sighed. Yeah. But I don't like it. He connected a pulse scanner to the conduit's chest. The second the device linked, the Graveborn structure reacted. Pulsing. Awakening. And then the conduit spoke. The warning. Vex froze. The voice wasn't human. It wasn't one voice. It was many, blended together, whispering from the void. You think this is victory? The air grew cold. You burn one body, but we are infinite. The conduit's head jerked unnaturally. Its lips twisted into something that almost resembled a grin. You have been seen. And now, we awaken. A deep hum filled the chamber. A signal. A pulse. Rook's voice was tight. Karn, shut it down. Now. Karn ripped the scanner free. The conduit twitched, convulsing violently, then went still. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ground beneath them shook. Rook grabbed her rifle. What the hell was that? Karn checked his scanner, and went pale. Captain, that pulse wasn't just a signal. He swallowed hard. It was a beacon. The Great Arrival. Vex's blood ran cold. Explain. Karn turned the scanner toward them. The readings were insane. That signal just echoed across deep space. I don't know where it went, but I can tell you one thing, his voice trembled. Something heard it. As if on cue, the comms burst to life. Iron Requiem to ground teams, something is coming. Vex's stomach dropped. Clarify, he ordered. The comm officer's voice was frantic. Multiple anomalies appearing at the system's edge. We're picking up massive gravitational distortions, ships, sir. Hundreds of them. Rook exhaled sharply. Reinforcements? The officer's next words sent ice through Vex's veins. No, sir. It's not ours. Karn swore. The Graveborn weren't just waiting. They were summoning something. Vex clenched his fists. What are we looking at? A long pause. Then, finally. The deep space scanners just finished processing. The officer's voice was barely a whisper. Sir, it's a fleet. Bigger than anything we've ever seen. Then the comms screamed. Static, distortions, then a sound that wasn't sound. A whisper. No, not just a whisper. A chorus. A single, unified voice echoing through the stars. We are the forgotten. And we are coming. The beginning of the end. Vex looked at his team, his heart hammering in his chest. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. This was a war against something far, far greater than they had ever imagined. They had won a battle. But the real war had just begun. The Iron Requiem's war room was deathly silent, except for the steady hum of the holodisplays. Tactical readouts scrolled across the screen, but Vex barely glanced at them. He was staring at the long-range sensor data. The Graveborn fleet had arrived. Hundreds, no, thousands, of vessels, their twisted forms blotting out the stars. Some were once human warships, now warped beyond recognition, fused with pulsing, organic matter. Others were entirely alien, hulking constructs that seemed to breathe as they moved through space. But the worst was the Leviathan. A ship so large it defied logic. Nearly the size of a moon, its surface was a shifting mass of tendrils and plated armor. And at its core, something moved. A pulsating, abyssal heart, radiating raw, malevolent intelligence. A Graveborn overmind. Karn let out a shaky breath. We are so screwed. Rook clenched her jaw. We have to run. Vex exhaled. He'd known this moment would come. No, he said. We fight. The last stand. The fleet was already in battle positions, but against this? It wasn't a battle. It was suicide. The Black Revenant reported in. Captain, enemy ships are accelerating. They'll reach us in 10 minutes. Vex turned to his officers. Options. Rook's fingers flew across her console. We could try a full retreat, scatter across the system, make it hard for them to track us. Karn shook his head. Won't work. The Overmind knows us now. It's linked. Wherever we go, it'll follow. Vex ran a hand through his hair, his mind working at lightning speed. They needed a way to level the playing field. The Graveborn were stronger, more advanced, and outnumbered them 100 to 1. But they had one weakness. They were connected. Their entire strategy relied on the Overmind. It was their leader, their control center, the thing guiding the swarm. Vex gritted his teeth. We kill the Overmind. Rook looked at him like he'd lost his mind. That thing is inside the Leviathan, Captain. How the hell do we kill something the size of a moon? Vex's voice was cold. From inside. Silence. Then Karn let out a nervous laugh. Oh. Oh, that's insane. Vex turned to Rook. Can we get close enough for a boarding assault? She hesitated. Maybe, if we use the debris field as cover. But once we're inside, there's no guarantee we can get out. We don't need to get out, Vex said. We just need to blow it to hell. Boarding the beast. The fleet opened fire, lashing out at the Graveborn ships as the Iron Requiem and a handful of escort vessels punched forward, slipping through the chaos. The Leviathan loomed ahead. Its hull rippled, shifting as if alive. The moment the Iron Requiem got close, the Graveborn reacted. Defense turrets burst to life, spitting energy beams. Organic tendrils lashed out, trying to grab the ship. All power to shields. Rook barked. The ship shuddered violently as it powered through. Dropships launched, carrying helljumpers and demolition teams straight into the Leviathan's surface. Vex led the charge. His boots hit the shifting metal, his rifle already raised. The hull was alive, pulsing beneath his feet. Graveborn warriors emerged from the flesh-like walls, screeching as they charged. The battle was brutal. Pulse rifles tore through Graveborn bodies, but they adapted, some regenerating, others twisting into new, deadlier forms. The air was thick with screams and gunfire. Then Karn shouted, "We found the core chamber. The heart of the beast." They pushed through, blasting through reinforced corridors made of Graveborn-infested metal. Finally, they reached it. The Overmind. A massive, pulsating heart, suspended in a cavernous void. The walls around it were lined with human faces, their mouths whispering. Vex clenched his fists. These were the Graveborn's victims, hollowed-out minds, trapped in an eternal nightmare. "Set the charges," he said grimly. Karn and the demolition team worked fast, planting antimatter bombs along the Overmind structure. Then the whispers stopped. The air grew cold. And the Overmind spoke. "You cannot kill what does not die." The walls moved. Tendrils lashed out, impaling one of the helljumpers. A Graveborn warlord emerged, towering, armored in black chitin, eyes burning with intelligence. Vex didn't hesitate. He charged. The fight was savage. The warlord moved like lightning, its claws ripping through armor. Vex dodged, firing point-blank into its chest, but it kept coming. The bombs were armed. "Vex!" Karn shouted. "We have to go." Vex locked eyes with the warlord. He was out of time. With a growl, he grabbed a deadman detonator from his belt. He grinned. "Then let's test that theory." And he pressed the switch. The end, or the beginning? The antimatter bombs detonated. A shockwave ripped through the Leviathan, tearing through its core. The Overmind screamed, a sound that echoed across the battlefield. And then, for the first time, the Graveborn hesitated. Their ships staggered, their movements faltering. The Overmind was dead. The human fleet took the chance. They struck back hard, annihilating the remaining enemy ships. One by one, the Graveborn war machines went silent. The Leviathan imploded, its vast body collapsing into itself. And inside that dying husk, Vex was gone. Epilogue. Days later, the fleet gathered in orbit. The war was over. But Rook stood on the bridge of the Iron Requiem, staring into space. Because in the silence of deep space, something still whispered. A faint, distorted echo of Vex's voice. You cannot kill what does not die. She shivered. The war was won. But something told her. It wasn't over. Not yet. End.